It's 11 o'clock. Welcome to all of you who are joining us today for our webinar, Say Goodbye Nerves, How to Facilitate and Present Like a Pro. You are joining the Center for Continuing Education, our career and professional development team. You will be led by our wonderful, enthusiastic and very knowledgeable instructor here, Sherry Hildred. She is a very busy professional who has been instructing with us for about 11 years. She has many specialties, but her specialties here at the center include project management, business communications, and some leadership courses as well. As you saw when you joined, we do record this webinar. The first 45 minutes will be Sherry presenting and sharing her knowledge. And the last 15 minutes we will save for all of your questions. If you have questions while the presentation is going and you want to put them in the chat, please feel free to do so. We will be gathering those. You will all be muted during the presentation, but then we will share those questions with Sherry from the chat for the last 15 minutes, or you can open mic it and share then. I hope you enjoy the presentation. Welcome, Sherry, and thank you for joining us.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Michelle, for the warm introduction and welcome. And to all of you who have joined today, welcome. I'm really looking forward to getting into our content today that is going to focus on an area that for many of us who find ourselves in a position in our professional work where we need to facilitate or do presentations, that we find our nerves do get the best of us. And there are certainly some strategies that we can look at to help quell and calm some of those nerves and really bring out the best in our facilitation, in our presentation activities. So really looking forward to getting into our content here today. Before we get started, folks, I do want to acknowledge that the University of Regina is situated on the territories of the Cree, Saulteaux, Dakota, Lakota, and Nakota, and the homeland of the Métis and Mai Chief Nation. The University of Regina is on Treaty 4 territories with a presence in Treaty 6. So again, I do want to acknowledge the lands that we are so blessed to be able to be working on and gathering on here today. Again, my name is Sherry Hildred. I am a PMP, which stands for Professional Project Manager. Been with the university teaching in a number of disciplines for about the last 11 years. And one of those areas of discipline is, as you'll see here on the opening welcome screen, related to the business communications professional micro-credential. So this content around how to facilitate and present better, how to calm those nerves, is really something that we also touch on in one of the classes in that micro-credential, which is the facilitation and consensus building class. So that is one of the classes that I teach. I'm going to talk a little bit about that particular course as well as the micro-credential as we move through today's content. Now, before we get started, just a couple of other quick housekeeping items. As Michelle mentioned, our presentation is being recorded today. So it will be following the webinar. For any of you that registered, you're actually going to receive an email with a link to that recording. So again, within, I believe, about a couple of business days, you'll receive that link, and into the future, all recorded webinars will be available for you to come back to. I do want to take again just a moment to thank Michelle Mickelson, Program Coordinator with the university, and I also have Emma from Student Instructor Services on the line. So with Michelle's assistance in moderating, Emma's assistance in gathering up your questions in the chat, which, as Michelle said, I will address at the end of the webinar. Again, about 45 minutes to get through our content. Try to preserve about 15 minutes so we can really have some good Q&A session, opportunity to connect and really engage. And again, I always welcome folks to reach out to me even beyond the webinar. I've included my email address for you on the home screen and on our thank you page. So certainly look forward to hearing from you in the future, should you have any questions. A couple of other things with respect to the webinar, again, just housekeeping. The slide deck itself, folks, is not provided to participants. So I really would encourage you to make notes as we're going through the actual webinar content. And again, should you have any questions and reflection on the webinar, you can always reach out to me. So again, I'm really excited not just to share some of the content around how to calm your nerves and present like a pro, but also give you a little bit of a sneak peek of how this fits into some of the class content, certainly within our professional micro-credential, as well as the digital badges, of which the facilitation and consensus building is one of them. Final item, for any inquiries related to registration or programming inquiries, you are welcome to put those in the chat. However, they will be responded to by our student and instructor staff, not by myself. And they will absolutely get back to you. You can always call the number in the lower left-hand corner of the screen with any program or registration inquiries, or certainly feel free to email Student Instructor Services, and they'll be more than happy to give you a hand with your registration inquiries. Now, just a word here, folks, on the business communications professional micro-credential. For many of these webinars that I do find that some folks are familiar with the U of R micro-credentials, and others not so much. So I just wanted to give a brief overview. With the micro-credentials, the way that they work is that they really are intended to be short, verifiable learning experiences. So again, we're looking at a specific skill set. We typically have 3 complementary digital badges that make up each micro-credential. And the badges are intended to be really flexible, quick, and really aim to enhance or expand or reskill a certain subject matter. So in the case of the business communications professional micro-credential, we have 3 badges: written communications, presentation and public speaking, as well as facilitation and consensus building. So it's the facilitation and consensus building that I will focus in on. However, much of the subject matter often dovetails into written communications, presentation, and public speaking as well. So again, as you're looking at this idea of a micro-credential or the digital badges, I do want to certainly make sure we're sharing enough information so you know what the micro-credentials look like, and of course, any of the upcoming courses that we would be delivering. So I'll just speak to that briefly at the end of our session today. Again, for anyone who is looking at, upskilling, looking at building new skills, maybe expanding existing knowledge, job seekers, it's just fantastic with our digital badges and the micro-credentials. Very recognizable, excellent addition to resumes, LinkedIn profiles, and so on. Again, just a quick nod here to some of the reference materials I've used in building the webinar for today, as well as the facilitation and consensus building course. So again, during the course itself, we cover extensive content related to group facilitation skills, being able to communicate with purpose, developing different business communication capacities to be able to support consensus building, so on and so forth. So again, for the reference materials you see here, these were certainly sources or resources that I utilized in building the webinar and in the course content. So always like to give credit where credit is due. Moving into the webinar itself. So this is really where, I often say, even for those of us that are seasoned in facilitating, presenting, public speaking, even for those of us that do that fairly regularly with our work, then our nerves can get the best of us. When I talk to students in delivering various course content and sort of ask that question about speaking in front of a group, here are some of the things that I hear regularly. I don't like eyes on me. I get so nervous. I don't like being watched, or all the way through to individuals actually really panicking, shaking, perspiring, almost, that they can't breathe, for example. So the anxiety can be quite significant. There is a good news story on the other side of that there are different skills and strategies and techniques that really can help individuals overcome some of these barriers or challenges. Honestly, you are not alone if you experience these types of symptoms from even the thought of public speaking. And again, the really great news is that, I always say facilitation, it really is an art that can be learned. It is possible to learn and acquire skills for better collaboration, whether it's in group facilitation, presenting information in a way that's really going to spark and engage the audience, leading and engaging groups, and particularly when we're trying to arrive at consensus, and how do we move a group through to that. So again, to do all of this, we need to find ways to really disarm our panic reflex when it comes to presenting and facilitating. One of the strategies that we will look at is this idea of moving the attention away from ourselves. So very naturally, we think about, well, I'm standing up in front of a group. Are they going to, will I be well received? Am I going to be a bomb? Will it be an opportunity for really engaging, and I'll see participation from folks? Or what if they don't receive what I have to say well? So there's a number of different things that can sort of move us into that panic mode. And as I say, there are lots of strategies to really calm and quell and manage some of those, or as I say, disarm some of those feelings that one might have when you're looking at facilitating or presenting in front of a group. So I want to get right into that. What are some of these things that we can do? How does this work? How do we get started? The first word of advice is certainly to think about the audience. So, as I mentioned, this idea of shifting the focus away from ourselves to the audience, to really genuinely seek to understand the audience, who they are, what their needs are. So when we're starting to put together a presentation, very naturally, our tendency is to think about the topic. And then we immediately get into sort of the inside granular details. And this can really make it quite difficult to break down, the wall between us and the audience by flipping the script and thinking about what does the audience need? Who will be in the room? Why are they there? What do they need from me? If we can ask and really specifically answer those questions, we can start to flip that script, focusing on the needs of the audience, and by better identifying those needs and really focusing in on how to best engage with them, we can start crafting messaging that's going to make sense. So speaking at the level of audience, not too technical, for example, different ways of engagement that really can work significantly well. So again, regardless of the length of time or practice or opportunity that you've had for facilitation or presenting, the skills that we're going to look at really will start moving in that direction of focusing on audience, thinking about trust building, looking at better engagement, or how do we seek out better engagement and participation in meetings, presentations, other facilitation opportunities. So again, with these new skills and confidence, you can certainly learn through this art of facilitation to effectively engage with different audiences. So first, I want to look at the number one best kept secret, I would call it, with respect to facilitation. And this is all related to eye contact, folks. The reality is, when we have nerves and anxiety, we are starting to build walls. And the walls, theoretical walls, are between us and the audience. So that could look like, for example, burying ourselves in our notes or PowerPoint presentation, looking down at the floor, looking away, anything that will avoid us having to have individual eye contact. So what I want you to think about first, or to consider, remember, when you're presenting, every individual in that space feels that you're presenting to them individually. So the practice of starting direct eye contact and engagement, it could be one sentence at a time, one thought at a time, one clause at a time, and to directly look at individuals in the audience instead of sort of viewing them or seeing them as a group of people. I do recommend starting, for your own comfort level, starting at the outer edges of, let's say, the meeting room or the space. So the individuals that are on the periphery or the outside of the room. So it allows you to have a longer, further distance engagement, trying to seek out direct eye contact. As you're moving through your presentation, one sentence, thought, concept at a time, doing so in a manner that allows you to slowly work your way forward with your eye contact to individuals in the space. This takes practice. It is not easy. It can be very difficult to overcome. However, with practice and repetition, this really will start to calm your nerves and start to calm your anxiety. It gives us a sense as a presenter, instead of presenting in front of 500 people or 30 people or 10 people, could even cause anxiety. It allows us to have more of a direct connection with one individual, to move from presentation to conversational style, and it will become much more natural, and in turn take away some of that anxiety. So number one best kept secret, that direct eye contact. Start at the furthest edges of a room, start moving in. Won't be easy at first, but start and keep practicing it. Again, with that increased practice in making eye contact while speaking, it really will start to actually calm your nerves and your anxiety. Give it a try. One of the pieces I wanted to cover when we talk about facilitation, engagement, and particularly consensus building, although the bulk of this webinar is focused on calming nerves and how that supports facilitation and presentation like a pro, if you will, I did also want to highlight the consensus building component, which often is part of our facilitation, our presentation meetings, discussions, and where we sometimes have barriers to achieving, or barriers that get in the way of consensus building. So again, as we look at increasing engagement with participants, this is something that, again, in the facilitation and consensus building class, obviously as the name denotes, we really do take a deeper dive, and we look at, what are and how do we overcome some of those communication barriers. We also look at dealing with difficult situations, creative problem solving approaches. So what can help us get to resolution or consensus within a group. We also look at challenging behaviors that you might encounter when you are facilitating. And again, part of gaining that confidence, calming the nerves and anxiety, is learning and being prepared, not just to how to deal with difficult situations, but also with some of those challenging behaviors. And again, some of those challenging behaviors come from a good space. You might have a conversation dominator who is just a subject matter expert. They're so passionate about the subject matter or the topic that they tend to dominate the conversation. But you do need to have strategies to manage that. No different than you need to have strategies to manage, side conversations that might be happening in the room. You could have participants who are, I call them my parrots. They're the repeaters or the parrots or the ramblers in the group. How do we deal with some of those challenging behaviors? What about disruptive audience members? What about absolute silence? So again, in the facilitation and consensus building class, we don't just focus on the facilitation side. And again, the bulk of this webinar is focused on calming those nerves. However, part of those nerves and that anxiety can be further sparked when we have challenging personalities in the room, perhaps, or challenging situations. So again, this is something that we do take a look at in the course content itself, just to really make sure we're providing a real breadth and depth of skills and capacity building, not just for facilitation and presenting and calming nerves, but also to really manage some of these challenging situations that might present themselves. So with that in mind, I do want to just start talking a little bit about, I've selected sort of the top 10, if you will, techniques for calming those nerves. And I want to have a look at some of the strategies for each of these. So again, I can't say enough about practice and, practice, practice, practice. The idea here is that if you're doing a presentation, and there is a difference, folks, between facilitating and presenting. So facilitating, we're typically covering some subject matter, sharing some information, and then we're really, as a facilitator, guiding group discussion. So think about it sort of as 20% asking questions or presenting information and 80% listening. When we're presenting, different than facilitating, we're really doing the opposite. It's about 80% sharing information and about 20% of the time responding to questions. So if you are presenting, and where I say practice, 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 this is literally practicing. So you have a presentation, you might have a PowerPoint, visual aids, you might have other context or tools or media that you're using for the presentation. Practice the presentation, write it out. It can go a long way in building that confidence around the material. If we are confident in what we're speaking about and we can come at the subject matter or the topic, with confidence and authority around our knowledge and our expertise, it really can support calming those nerves. With facilitation, it's a little bit different because, again, we're presenting some information, but we're really trying to open it up to group discussion. And those techniques around practice are a little bit different. It might be practice in, people engagement, in some of those consensus building strategies. So again, in whatever form, whether it's facilitation or presentation, I do recommend practice. I do recommend writing it out. And the other strategy you may want to try is to actually record yourself. So that could be just audio, it could be video and audio ideally. The idea being that when we can review that recording, not only does it answer the age-old question, is that what I sound like? It also allows you to look at where we can make improvements. So are we taking appropriate pauses at certain breaks in the material? Are there different approaches that we could take in maybe looking at the language we're using? Is it too technical? Could we use plain language or make that concept simpler? So again, we can garner some good information from watching our own recordings and listening to the audio. So another strategy you may want to look at. The second technique that, and again, some of these you're going to think, well, how does this calm my nerves or manage anxiety? It's about really garnering and gaining comfort. So when I say change your position, I literally mean that. The idea of practicing while you're standing up, practicing speaking as you are moving, walking in a space. Even recommend practicing standing on one leg with your arms wide open, hands on your hips, different stances. And we'll talk a little bit about the importance of stance. But the idea that the more physical opportunity you have to change position and practice speaking while doing so will actually give you more of a comfort level when you're actually doing the presentation or the facilitation. So again, give it a try. The third strategy, and this is quite interesting, it's the idea of really transforming your nervous energy into enthusiasm. So when I talk about this idea, as odd as it may sound, using different techniques such as listening to music that pumps you up. So maybe think of your gym workout playlist, something that really energizes you. For other individuals, to really gain that sort of level of focus before a presentation, it might be listening to classical music. So the idea of taking that nervous energy and focusing it in a way that can really build your own individual enthusiasm. What's going to take away the nervousness, the jittery sort of energy, and transform it into really energetic, dynamic, enthusiastic presentation, and using that to really engage with, win over the audience, if you will, versus being more subdued. So again, we want to try to harness that enthusiastic or that energetic self as much as you're able before going in front of a group. So again, give it a try before the next presentation you have to give, listening to some of that music that might pump you up. I do highly recommend, number 4, when we talk about calming nerves, if you are presenting as part of, let's say, you're doing a workshop as part of a series. It could be, staff events, maybe it's at a conference and there's a number of presenters. I do recommend arriving ahead of time and attending other speeches. So if that's, there's conferences I've attended where they're just a one-day conference, some will be, 2-3 days long, others a whole week long. I try to not just attend early, but to attend other presenters, and most importantly, anyone who's speaking directly before me. And the reason I say that is, first of all, it allows you to get a little bit of a sense of the audience. So how folks, how they're sort of configured, sitting in groups at tables, so on and so forth. It gives you a little bit of a lay of the land. And we're going to talk about that as far as arriving early and things you're going to want to do. However, by arriving early and attending others that are presenting, other speeches, it really can give you just a good sense of the crowd. It can give you a sense of their appetite for, as you're listening to other presenters, their appetite for humor? Are they more of a straightforward, straight up group? One of the examples I give, just about a year ago now, I presented at Special Olympics. It was a leadership conference here in Saskatchewan. And the presenter, taking my own advice, arriving and attending other speeches, the presenter before me was a curling Olympian. And of course, she stole the hearts of the crowd, and stole the stage too, and the hearts of the crowd. But by listening to her, she was talking in her very final comment, she was talking about, the importance of the work of Special Olympics, engaging youth, the important work of the organizations across the province. And so I was able to take her final comments and, sort of springboard on that. So obviously stating the most obvious, hard act to follow, but noting her comments around the importance of these organizations. And I was presenting on governance, kind of a dry topic, but I was able to say, governance is critical to these organizations being able to exist and to doing the good work that, Jennifer Jones had talked about in her speech. So having that opportunity to listen to other presenters or speakers ahead of you, it can give you comfort level with, who the audience is, but it also can often give you a little bit of material to springboard from. And this is a bit of a dovetail too, folks, into this idea of arriving early. So, and it may seem, very logical and simplistic, but again, where am I going? Where am I going to park? How long does it take to get to where I need to go? What floor am I on? What meeting room? And then once you're in that space, what do the logistics look like? How is the lighting? Who's running audio visual? Are you going to have, a lapel mic? Will you have a handheld mic? And now you have a cord potentially that you have to manage and not trip over. It gives you allows you and gives you time to really gain comfort with the environment, the space that you're going to be in. So again, taking that opportunity to arrive early just to get a lay of the land will go a long way in quelling some of those nerves. The other side of it is there's nothing worse than running late. Nothing's going to amp up or increase your anxiety by running late, and now you don't know where you're going and you're hot and sweaty, and who do you need to be talking to and what needs to happen next. So again, it seems like very logical advice, but nonetheless, arriving early and making sure that you have a good sense of the space that you're going to be in, and potentially avert any disaster, or not disasters, distractions as well. I did a blog recently for the university, and I included a little bit of information that talked about a session I was doing in Calgary. And it just so happened that hockey players Sidney Crosby and team were having their breakfast in a meeting room on the same floor as our meeting room. So it was just two private meeting rooms. And of course, being sort of, a personality, I had many of the folks that were part of the session that I was doing, obviously, starstruck and trying to peek into the team's breakfast room and so on. So again, by arriving early and sort of herding the cats and getting all my folks in and, let's leave the hockey players to have their breakfast. It gave time to do that. And we were able to start on time despite having some distraction. A couple of other things I want to share with you in our top 10 techniques. The idea of imagining positive outcomes. Now, again, whether you consider yourself sort of a Zen master or not, the use of visualization really can be quite powerful. So if you are able to envision a positive outcome in your mind, there will be a greater likelihood for it to actually play out. So again, instead of focusing on the negative, for example, such as, oh, I hate public speaking, I don't like eyes on me, I'm so uncomfortable, I'm going to be terrible. Instead of focusing on that sort of negative place that you may want to go, visualize the audience smiling, maybe nodding, applauding, maybe laughing. What are you expecting to draw out from the audience? This coupled with really authentic, genuine enthusiasm. Remember, harness all of that, that anxiety, energy, and redirect it into enthusiasm can really go a long way with audience engagement, really practicing this idea of being mindful with the audience, the concept of being present. And again, taking just those few moments, it could be as little as 30 to 60 seconds ahead of presenting, just to take those few moments for quiet, mindful reflection, close your eyes, visualize what success looks like for that facilitation or that presentation activity. Other good advice that can go a long way. I've noted it here as breathe. We should naturally be doing this. However, one of the most common reactions to nerves is to stop breathing, not be mindful of our breathing, and worse yet, to hold our breath is very natural when people get nervous. So you want to be thinking about breathing. And if you incorporate this idea of pausing within the presentation, smiling, another reason, a cause for pause, it will allow you to have better control of your breathing. So the adverse consequence of wanting to hold one's breath or to tighten up with anxiety or nerves, if we focus on breathing, we really can start calming those nerves. So we're getting that oxygen that we need to relax the muscles, to relieve some of that tension. Again, some of the best advice really is around finding places to take meaningful pauses. So a pause can reinforce a concept that you've just introduced, or a topic or an idea. Again, taking that opportunity to smile really not only gives us more of that positive sort of imaging or visualization, but it also gives us a reason to stop, take a breath. So again, this idea of breathing, pausing, and smiling, and being mindful of it. So again, actively thinking about pausing, actively thinking about smiling, actively, particularly if you're writing out your presentation, actively looking for places where pauses would be appropriate. And again, you may want to even denote that in your written presentation. So again, smiling increases those really positive endorphins, of course, that help us move from anxiety into calmness. And again, with the added benefit of really thinking through your breathing and planning for pauses can go a long way in calming nerves. The next item, folks, when we talk about some of the best techniques, I've referred to it here as power stance. So again, we don't want this to be some sort of animated, not natural to you stance. However, there is benefit in practicing using different stances that really sort of exude this idea of confidence, of command of the room, if you will. So when we talk about power stance, again, focusing on body language really can elevate confidence. It really can calm some of those pre-delivery nerves that you may have. So the reality is that your brain is going to follow along with what your body is physically demonstrating. So if you are physically demonstrating confidence, that is already going to set your brain into motion of confidence. It doesn't have to be, significant power stances with, both hands on hips and so on. It might just be practicing holding your head high. If you're used to maybe looking down and, we've created one of those walls or barriers, we're getting buried into our notes, or we're looking at our PowerPoint presentation, or we're not maintaining eye contact. So it could just be some mindful consideration of strong posture and keeping one's head high. That can be a really good starting point. The more you practice moving, physically moving as you are talking, you're also going to find what's comfortable for you. And again, I can't say this enough. It doesn't matter how long or seasoned one is in facilitating and presenting. There's always opportunity to try different techniques, different approaches. For myself, it's interesting. Even now, when I have opportunity to facilitate in person, I find that my most comfortable stance when I'm presenting, if I can wear a suit jacket, something that has a pocket where I can have one hand in a pocket, for some reason, that just is such a comfortable place for me, where I feel that I have sort of the best stance when I'm presenting. I'm a hand talker. You guys have seen this already, even on our remote webinar here today. Do what is natural to you. Again, recording yourself. If you're able to record yourself visually, you'll also see some of those cues or opportunities for improvement, what worked really well for you, what didn't work so well. So again, it doesn't have to be a very significant stance. It may just be this idea of moving around. Whatever you do, don't sit. At minimum, if you're physically able to stand, move about a space, I would highly recommend it. Again, practice different stances. and different physicalities. So that could be speaking with your hands. That could be something that makes sense for you. Don't do anything that's uncomfortable. If it's uncomfortable, it's going to translate as not authentic or genuine. So you're really trying to find your genuine self and what you're comfortable with. Water, again, this sounds like something that is very logical, and it is. However, we can often forget to be coming to presentations or facilitations properly hydrated. The reality is, the physicality of it is that anxiety does cause a dry mouth. It's sometimes called cotton mouth. And plain and simple, staying hydrated is certainly going to go a long way in avoiding that dry mouth or that cotton mouth. Again, when we're holding our breath, natural response to anxiety, even by having sips of water, it reminds us not to be holding our breath, really supports that regular breathing as well. Try to have a bottle of water or a glass of water close to you during your presentation. For me, I have learned, because I'm a hand talker, no glasses, nothing that isn't sealed on top, because I'm a hand talker. I've sent more glasses of water flying in my presentations. Bottled water with the lid on for me each and every time. And again, having that bottled water there is an awesome excuse. Take a sip. It's an awesome excuse for a pause. Again, giving yourself a chance to have that breath and also just to recenter a bit. The other and final piece that I just wanted to talk briefly about is this idea of really facing the fear, not fighting the fear, facing the fear that you have, the anxiety that you have head on. It is natural, folks, to let our own thoughts take over, those negative ideas, worrying about if people are going to notice the anxiety. All of that is only going to increase nervousness. So again, if you can embrace that fear, and just own it. So for example, if you're using some of these strategies, let's say you've, arrived early, you maybe have a chance to view the participants, maybe you've even had a chance to greet participants as they're coming into your session. You can open with a comment around that, sort of addressing the fear straight up, saying, I was really nervous about presenting today. However, after spending a few minutes meeting folks as they were coming into the room today, I really have a good, I'm really excited about this presentation. I'm really confident that the items that we're going to cover are, the ones that make sense for, our business challenges today, or the topic that we're exploring today. Again, facing it head on, even acknowledging that anxiety or that fear can go a long way in calming it. So remember, anxiety isn't bad. Let's shift that focus to enthusiastic energy whenever possible. We just need to transform it to really be able to tap into some of those positive outcomes. So with that, folks, I do want to, and again, those are just a handful of the techniques that we not only cover in the facilitation and consensus building class, these and many more, and then take that sort of deeper dive in, including practicing some of these strategies. So again, I hope this gives you a good little sneak peek at some of what our course content is, and certainly some techniques that you can start using right away. So in brief summary, folks, in the facilitation and consensus building class itself, in addition to what I've sort of talked about already or outlined, again, we do look at communication, both in theory and practice. So how do we break down communication barriers, what's getting in the way of communication? And again, that really does support us in being less anxious and less nervous when we're facilitating and presenting or trying to lead a group through to consensus building. Different audience engagement techniques. So these are proven strategies that work. We cover those as well in the course content. People leader and people engagement skills that really do work to spark action and engagement of others. Other things that we cover in the course content, really in the idea of incorporation of your audience's insight. So as I mentioned earlier today, we want to focus on, who's in the audience, why are they there, what are their needs? So how do we incorporate that insight in the work that we're doing, whether it is facilitation or presentation? Again, in the course itself, we look at those obstacles. So what's getting in the way, those walls between us and the audience, and how can we start breaking those walls down? So whether that's communicating sensitive topics, for example, managing challenging situations, as I mentioned earlier, or managing particularly challenging behaviors, perhaps by participants, Again, all covered in the course. And again, all of this really designed to build capacities to support you in doing the work of facilitating, presenting, and bringing groups along in a discussion, making sure we have full engagement. We're creating safer spaces where everyone feels comfortable participating. So again, a number of really great pieces that we get into in the course content. And again, a little bit of a sneak peek through what we've covered here today in calming nerves. For the course content in the micro-credential program and each of the digital badges, one quick note here, I wanted to, because I am often asked, well, how is the course built? And certainly for the facilitation and consensus building, we do have sort of a necessary piece of lecture. So the introduction of a concept or an idea, lots of group work. So participation is really key. It's very interactive. Relevant case studies, project scenarios, often videos or other technical reading. Again, with the micro-credentials and the digital badges, they are delivered remotely. So we have a portion of synchro work in the classroom together in a Zoom room, and then there is asynchro work. So reading or other technical items that would be done outside of the classroom. Lots of opportunity for question and answer, and always a little bit of a toolkit, if you will. These are practical takeaway tools that you can start using right away in building your own professional toolkit and really customizing it for your own individual needs. So again, when we talk about the art of facilitating or learning the skill sets, it is still an art. It's your art form. So you're going to want to cultivate and craft your own approach to facilitating and presenting. What we cover in the course is to start building that professional toolkit for you, so you really can start engaging in this art of facilitation and building your own capacity and your own approach that is genuine and authentic and unique to you. So again, always excited to get into sort of the tools that folks can use in their practical day-to-day work. Again, for the upcoming courses, I just want to flag the next facilitation and consensus building that I will be delivering is on April 3rd to 5th. So again, if you are interested, be sure to reach out to SIR Student Instructor Services, SIS. Their phone number and email address is just on the bottom of the screen there. And coming up a little bit sooner here, folks, we have one of my colleagues, Loretta Gerlash, amazing, phenomenal instructor with the University of Regina. She is doing a class, a digital badge in this professional micro-credential of business communications, where she's focusing on presentation and public speaking. So naturally, I'm sure, as you would suspect, there are some sort of segues or natural sort of conduits between the facilitation and consensus building class and Loretta's presentation and public speaking class. So again, even some of the pieces that we've covered here today, it's a little bit of a crossover, if you will, and there's definitely some, not necessarily similarities, but good connection between the two classes. So you come out of the business communication micro-credential with just an awesome skill set, complementary skills from the various classes. So again, a shout out to Loretta's class coming up here on March 15th to 17th. If anyone's interested, again, reach out to SIS Services. They'd be more than happy to help you. And as I say, with Loretta's class being such a complimentary one, it can be a nice little springboard before moving into the facilitation and consensus building class at the beginning of April. So with that, folks, I do appreciate your time here today. Thank you so much for joining the webinar. We always look forward to staying connected. Follow us on our socials, as I've shared with you here up on the screen. And of course, as I mentioned at the top of the hour, you are always welcome to email me directly, reach out if there's any questions that you have, other things that you might want to ask me about relative to this idea of calming our nerves, different tools and techniques that can help us with our facilitation and presentation. So again, thanks so much, everyone. I'm more than happy to move into a little bit of a Q&A session. So I'm more than pleased to do that. And again, just a quick note that I have included my email address for you. So I invite you, don't be a stranger. Feel free to reach out, and I would look forward to hearing from you.